my little boy Montgomery and my daughter Ada Beth. And I tell this story probably every other night of my life as I travel and tour, and I show this picture, and I show this picture more as a reminder to me that some things are worth fighting for. I would not have this picture. I wouldn't have this picture if I had looked at my wife that night and said, "You're not worth fighting for." She wouldn't be in my arms, and Montgomery would not have been born, and Ada Beth would not exist if I had said, "This is not worth fighting for." That shakes me every other night of my life as I share this story, and reminds me that some things are worth fighting for. Some things are not worth fighting for. And most of us fight for a bunch of stuff that just ain't worth fighting for. I used to fight for it, and I still struggle with it. You might not call it that, but you fight for something. At the end of every week, you sit down and you are bruised and scarred and exhausted because you fought for something. You fought for a bigger house, a cooler car, or popularity or fame. You fought for something. And I want to sit down at the end of my week and be exhausted because I fought for the kingdom of heaven. I want to carry bruises and scars because I fought for my family. I want to carry bruises and scars because I fought for my kids. I want to fight for things that matter. And the funny thing is that when we fight for things that matter, all the rest of it gets added to us. The word says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you." My blessings have gone much further than I ever thought they were when I started fighting for things that matter instead of fighting for a bunch of junk. God gave me everything my heart desired when I started fighting for things that mattered. So I started fighting for my kids, and my wife and I talk about it on a regular basis. What is worth fighting for? We call it our monthly audit. Let's fight for things that matter. And we started fighting for our children, and then we said, let's fight for a child that's not ours. We started fighting for this little boy named Kahilu. He lives in Uganda, and we fight for him every month. I gave up my cable to start with, because at the time I didn't have the $32 it took to fight for him, so I gave up my cable. We fought for Kahilu. I wrote him letters. I said, "I'm fighting for you, buddy. I'm giving up House Hunters International and Duck Dynasty on your behalf. And you're worth fighting for." And one night, my wife and I were out at a restaurant, and we spent more money on one meal. We were at Applebee's. We spent more money on one meal than it takes to provide for Kahilu for an entire month. And we thought, we could skip going to Applebee's. I'm not trying to take away from the ministry of Applebee's. I know they're doing wonderful things in your neighborhood. Megan and I believed we could skip Applebee's and we could fight for another child, so we did. And I wrote that little boy letters, and I said, "Hey, I'm fighting for you. I'm giving up Fiesta line chicken and mozzarella sticks on your behalf. And you're worth fighting for." And after 1 year of fighting for this child, we got a letter in the mail that said because of our sponsorship, his dad was able to learn a trade, and his family no longer needed our help. 1 year. My wife and I skipped 12 visits to a restaurant. We still ate. We just ate at home. But God used it, and he multiplied it, and he saved the life of this child and his family. And we thought, this is worth fighting for. Let's fight for more children. And we started to do so. And a strange thing happened. The more we started fighting, the more we started giving, the more we started serving other people, the more God grew what we had and gave us more opportunities to help even more people. So I decided to go on a trip and visit some of these kids. I went and visited them. I sang songs for them. They sang songs for me. I got to see them. They were real. And as I was there, I also got to visit a community of children who weren't being helped. And they asked me would I help them get water. Of course, I said yes. And they handed me a 5-gallon bucket. That's not how we get water in Nashville, Tennessee. But I took this 5-gallon bucket and I started walking down this mountain. It was a steep mountain, a dusty animal trail, 100-degree heat. And I'm walking down this mountain. This man walked past me, said something in his language. When I asked what he said, they told me he said, "White boy is going to fall off the mountain." So I'm being careful. I get down to the bottom of this mountain, and I can see people fighting. They are pushing and shoving, and they got buckets and jugs, and they're screaming at each other, and they're fighting for water. I stood above them, and I thought, this is chaos. You're fighting for water. Quit pushing one another down. Form a line. I just solved your problem. You're welcome. And as I'm thinking this, I reached in my book bag and I grabbed a bottle of water. I was thirsty. It was 100 degrees outside. I just walked a half hour down a dusty animal trail. And as I'm taking a drink of water, I think in my life, I have never worried about where I'm getting my next drink of water. It's never crossed my mind. When my children, Montgomery and Ada Beth, when they are thirsty, I go get them something to drink. Their choice of what they would like at that moment. If my son or my daughter were thirsty and the only way I could get them something to drink was to walk a half hour down a dusty animal trail in 100-degree heat and fight you for water, I would fight 6,000 of you for water. I would fight you for my kids. And out loud I said, God, forgive me, for I am so blessed, I am so spoiled, that I don't even know what it means to fight for life. I was down there for a couple hours and it came time to leave, so I walked up behind the crowd, I got my bucket, and I'm getting ready to push through, picking out the weakest people in the bunch, who am I going to knock down? And as I'm getting ready to push through the crowd, I notice a little boy. And I brought his picture, bring it with me, and they can show this child. He's standing next to me behind this crowd of people. And I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to push through this crowd to get water. How will this little boy push through this crowd to get water? So I asked a volunteer, and they said, Warren, he has to wait until someone will fight for him. He could be here all day. I thought about my kids. I thought about what my wife and I talked about, what is worth fighting for. And if that was a picture of my child, I would fight you for my child. But that's not my child. We look a lot alike, but it's not. I believe if it was a picture of your child or a child you know, you would fight me. You would fight me to save that child. You would lose because I am ripped. It's not a joke. So I looked at this little boy and I said, you're worth fighting for, brother. And I reached down and I grabbed his jug. I pushed through that crowd. I fought through that crowd. I filled that jug up with water. I filled my bucket up with water. I came back and I gave him his jug and I took off up the mountain. It took me an hour to get back up that mountain, 100-degree heat, pulling that 5-gallon bucket full of water behind me, trying not to fall as the prophet had foretold. I got to the top and I sat down under this tree and this little boy walked past me. I pointed him out and I said, I can't believe he does this every day. And they said, Warren, he lives in a different community than the one you're working in. He has at least another hour to walk. He spent his whole day out in 100-degree heat to get less water than it takes for me to flush a toilet in my house. I got home and I told my wife this story, and we walked around our house and thanked God for water. I'd never done that before, but I laid hands on the faucets. And I counted them up. There's a sink in my kitchen. There's a button on the front of my fridge that'll spit water at you if you touch it. There's 2 sinks in my bathroom, a tub. There's a shower. There's a hose that runs to the back of my washer. There's another sink in there. There's a sink in our half bath. Upstairs there's a sink and a tub and a shower. There's 3 toilets in my house, outside my house. There's 2 spigots, one on each side. So you don't have to walk way over there and waste all that time. I counted 17 places that water flows from my family. And I met a little boy who shares a stream of water, less than what runs out of one of my bathtubs. He shares that stream of water with 600 families, waiting for someone to fight for him so he can get less water than it takes for me to flush a commode. We are blessed. We are blessed. And I have loved what I have been hearing this weekend about serving others, because that's the key. You can chase all the prosperity you want to chase, and it will escape you unless you are chasing to serve others. If you are chasing to serve others, prepare yourself for God to pour more blessings on you than you are able to contain. The Word says it this way. He says that when you pour out, He will pour back to you. You will have to press it down, shake it together, and it'll still run over the edges. What God has in store for us when we serve others. I have seen it in my life. I never tell anybody this story. I never tell anybody this part of this story. But when my wife and I first started wanting to serve these children, we had to give up our cable to do so. In the few years that have passed that, we are completely debt-free, including our home. It's impossible. And my wife and I, we sponsor and we have fought for so many children because we believe they are worth fighting for. I wish I could bring one of these children. They won't let me, they say it's illegal. I could bring one of these children and stand them in front of the stage and I could say, you could, for $1 a day, you could save the life of this child. You could sit down with your family, you could start talking about things that are worth fighting for. For the price of 2 video games, you could sponsor a child for 3-4 months, half a year. It's unbelievable. And so I can't bring the child. I wish I could. I wish I could stand in front of you. I think if I could, you would run. If I could say, hey, you could save this little girl by skipping going to a restaurant once a month and eat a sandwich at home. Don't you believe that someone would come and rescue that girl? And if I could have a little boy standing here and I could say, you could give up some cable and come fight for this child. You can, $384 saves this child for an entire year. Someone would run. I can't. I actually get people to tell me I talk too much about it. That I shouldn't talk about it so much. I had a lady at a church one night, I got finished at a church. This lady comes to me and she said, you talk too much about that little boy. I paid to hear you sing. You wasted my time.
She's lost.
And I walked away from her and I just said thank you, and I walked away and I thought, what if it was her child? What if this was your child? Would I be wasting your time? If this was your child, you would encourage me to fight even harder. And so I fight. I fight for these children because they're worth fighting for. I brought 1,500 children with me tonight. I have 1,500 children here in this room. And I want you to imagine if they were standing down the aisles. What if I had 15 children in person standing around this room? And I could say, you can save one of these children. You can fight for one of these children. Would you grab one of their hands and fight for them? Like I did